Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. We'll have a fantastic one up for you this evening. We are going to be diving into a number of aspects of what I like to call the interdimensional universe or the connected universe. I did a presentation the other weekend at the MUFON Symposium called Connecting the Interdimensional Universe. And some of these elements this evening are going to be from that. We're going to get into interdimensional beings. We're going to get into multiple universes. We're going to get into what it actually means to be interdimensional, where we actually do see this throughout our ancient cultures. So before we get into all of that, first, I do want to let those know that are listening to the podcast version of this later. Please join us live every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. We are also broadcast. Actually, I'm simulcasting this on a number of different platforms tonight. I wanted to throw this out there in a few different places, but connecteduniverseportal.com. And also, I want to throw out there, we are back on Patreon as well. So patreon.com/Mike Ricksecker. But through the portal, you do get this weekly class. You get the after show for those that are going to be joining us for the after show tonight. You do get a special treat. You get the monthly Q&A videos, which everybody get the July questions in, those that are members, those that are time travelers, the Connect Universe portal. You get all the sneak peek and behind the scenes videos, the Mike's Morning Mug videos, all of that insider information on ancient Egypt. And well, we've got stuff from the American Southwest, Ireland. We've got UK stuff that's going to be going up there shortly, and so much more. So jump on that, connecteduniverseportal.com. And also for this particular topic this evening, this is really a preview. I mentioned MUFON Symposium the other weekend, but even the MUFON Symposium presentation was kind of a sneak peek of a special presentation I'm going to be doing September 27th this year, Wando House Museum in Brewster, Ohio. It is the special Interdimensional Universe presentation featuring, well, me. But we'll get into interdimensional beings, consciousness and time travel, stargates, portals, ancient symbolism, and so much more. See, a number of people are already joining us here. Tom McNicholas is in the house. Great to see you. There's Sarah Youssef, Jose Sanchez as well. And thank you. So many more. So, all right, let's go ahead and start getting into this. Those that are members of the Connected Universe portal, Tom and Sarah, you guys are going to recognize this. What does it mean when I talk the connected universe? Well, yes, there is that whole metaphysical woo-woo aspect of we're all connected. We are, though. We really, truly are. And a lot of times we are referring to that as an aspect of energy, an aspect of consciousness. But right now, we are connected. We are having this conversation. You guys are watching me. You have the comments down in the chat. All of that. Those that are listening later, you're listening to my voice. And again, I hope you do come out here later and join us. But we are also physically connected throughout the entire universe. And I love this image. Many people will recognize this from some of my branding. What are we looking at with this image? It looks like a giant colorful spider web. Well, this is the Chandra X-ray telescope from about 15 years ago. And all of those yellow and orange dots there are actually galaxies. And that crazy spider webby sort of aspect to it all, those are all gaseous filaments that are physically connecting these galaxies together. So we are actually physically connected. So us to the planet to the sun and the solar system to the galaxy to the universe to what's beyond that universe. We will dive into a little bit of that this evening. There's also this interesting image. I actually haven't thrown this one up there for a while. That's the Laniakea supercluster, and you see the little dot there. You are here. What I like about this is it almost looks like a heart, like our supercluster that we are in, which is a supercluster of galaxies, almost looks like a heart. Now, I want to know Who went out there and took that photo? Of course, it's not a photo. That's from all the data that they've collected with all of their observations of what it would look like from a broad perspective if you were to take us far outside of our galaxy. And so again, you can see these connections, these gaseous filaments that are connecting all of these galaxies together. And we do happen to be in a specific supercluster of galaxies in just a small portion of the universe. So what I have found fascinating here over the past couple of years, ever since they turned on the James Webb telescope, the scientists said, whoa, there's so much more out there. And I'm sitting back here like, you think so? You think so? I could never have guessed there was more out there than what we previously thought. It's kind of funny with humanity. We always seem to think that we are at like the apex of our research, of our science. And then, we tend to think, even like 150 years ago, there were those, I can't remember exactly who made the quote, but some scientists were talking about, we've reached the height of science. There's going to be a few things that we'll kind of fill in the gaps with, but we've pretty much figured it out. Yeah, well, things were quite different 150 years ago than they are now. But it seems like a lot of times our science is still kind of doing the same thing. Yeah, we're just going to fill in the gaps, and they flip something new on. It's like, whoa, there's so much more out there. And so they've been doing that with the James Webb telescope here the past couple of years. And earlier this year, we had a whole segment on, are we living in a black hole? Because one of the reports that came out of some of the research that they have been doing with the James Webb telescope is that we may actually be living in a black hole. The curvature of the far expanses of the universe are showing that there's something unusual. Are we actually looking at the event horizon of a black hole? And if that is true, then what is beyond that? What is beyond the universe? What goes on out there? Again, there's a whole episode on that. You can find that here on the channel. I have a blog article on that as well, which you can find on the what is it? connecteduniverse.substack.com. And also I do have linked down in the description a blog article on connecting the interdimensional universe, which came out last Friday. So you can check that out as well. So that has been a big question that theoretical physicists have been posing for a while now. They have been thinking about these things. If we have this kind of Russian doll thing of planet, solar system, galaxy, universe, what's on top of the universe? And is that something that's even bigger, wider, more expansive that all of this is enclosed in? Is it, well, if we're living in, say, a simulated universe, is that something beyond what we can grasp, beyond the far, far reaches of anything we could even touch? Or is it even another dimension? And so, yeah, we are getting into the interdimensional aspects of this here very, very shortly. But we do have to ask, what is beyond the universe? So theoretical physics has shown that there are multiple universes out there. And this isn't the idea of, the multiverse, different timelines, that sort of thing. I touch on some of those aspects in my time travel work. I'm not getting into that this evening, but there are physical universes out there. So our universe, much like our planet, is in a sort of Goldilocks zone. In other words, the conditions were perfectly right for our universe to spawn up and become created the way it is right now. Other universes didn't quite have enough going on with it. Different nuclear properties, different chemical makeup, and didn't quite get going and petered out. Others had way too much going on, fired up real quick, and after an initial burst was gone. So it never really quite got established. We happen to be in that Goldilocks zone, at least according to our theoretical physics, because we have not been able to see beyond the universe thus far in order to be able to prove that. But this is kind of where they've gone with the math. And as far as a physicality of it, it does make some sense that there should be something else beyond the universe. And there's always that question of, okay, what was before the universe? What created this universe? What's going to come after this universe? And that is where I believe, we are in that cyclical. Thank you. We are in a cyclical universe that, as this universe dies, when it finally has expended its life, then a new universe is going to be born out of it. So that's the whole symbolism of the Ouroboros. That's what we're seeing, like with the Anita Project and things like this that are down in Antarctica. And that's other research that we're not covering this evening, but I do cover it a bit in Portals to the Stars. I cover it in Travels Through Time and so forth. So I like this question. Which dimension are ghosts from? We're going to get into dimensions here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and start down that route. Okay, dimensions. And I'll just say this right now. It depends when you're talking like ghosts, human spirits. And this is a part that's actually coming toward later on in the show tonight. Is we are multidimensional beings, a fourth dimensional consciousness inside a third dimensional body, making us multidimensional beings. So keep that in mind. We'll get to that in a moment. So on that note, our theoretical physics show that we have up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, 0 through 10. So we're going to do a little dimensional primer very quick. Those that have been around for a while are familiar with this. So these are the ones that we have access to, 0 through 3. Again, we are in the fourth dimension known as time. Our consciousness is. Okay, we have access to all of those dimensions below us. So the 0 dimension, which is controversial, the physicists argue about that one. That's a point. That's the dot there. First dimension's a line. Second dimension is a plane, flat surface, and then third dimension is object. So any three-dimensional object that you can pick up. We have access to all those. That does mean that all of those other dimensions above ours, fifth, sixth, seventh, and onward, have access to time like we have access to three-dimensional objects. And that is one of the ways that they are able to travel through time. We're not getting into time travel this evening. It's kind of beyond the scope of the conversation, but is one of the, for me, one of the most fascinating things that I've ever gotten into and started researching. So that's all my travels through time. But with stacked time theory, the idea that all time is present, past, present, future, all here right now. Take where you're sitting. Every moment that has happened, is happening, and will happen, all there right now. Each moment, like a photograph in a giant stack of photos, which is why I call it stacked time theory. And each of those moments has its own frequency. And when two of those moments resonate at the same frequency, that's when you start getting like time slips and these kind of bleed overs from one moment to another. People believe, they might be seeing some sort of haunting or something like that. And it's really actually some sort of time slip. And this is the way that we would actually be able to travel through time, more via consciousness than like a machine. Again, beyond the scope of this evening. So when we start talking about something like interdimensional beings, okay, I can't play the clip here because I'll get flagged for copyright. But when I do my presentations, and I'm actually going to show this again back at the Connecting the Universe Interdimensional, or Connecting the Universe Interdimensional Universe special presentation in Brewster, Ohio. Check it out, September 27th. I will show this clip. And it's a clip from Ancient Aliens. It was actually the first episode I was ever on. And there's a segment there with Michio Kaku, a renowned physicist. I love Michio's work, and he's fun too. He and I are talking about dimensions. He gives this great analogy of take fish in a pond. And it's called the pond a dimension. And that's all they know is their life in the pond within that dimension. Well, if you were to lift them up out of the pond, they would suddenly see everything that's around it. Like maybe the pond is in a park, so they get to see the park. They get to see people walking around. They get to see a sidewalk. Maybe there's cars on the street beyond, and all these other things. There's a whole universe out there that they were not currently aware of. And so it's a great analogy for describing different dimensions. If you were to lift us into, humans into the next dimension, then we would see all these things that would just, boggle our minds. So in this sense, and I love showing this during my presentations, these children here are interdimensional beings. To the fish, they are, because they are beyond the scope of anything that they recognize in their world. They get a little bit of a glimpse if they decide to pop their head up at the surface of the water there, but generally they have no idea. And again, they have no idea of the path that this bridge is on, the park that's around her, or anything. That is beyond the scope of the fish's perception. So the children become interdimensional beings. So interdimensional beings is really how I got my start in this, without realizing that that was what it was. I'm going to play a clip here from the Shadow Dimension, first episode of the Shadow Dimension, the docuseries that I produced and is running right now on Tubi TV, Roku channel, some other smaller streaming services. I have the links down in the description. I'm going to play that here momentarily, but I do want to check out some of the comments first. So what do we have here? So again, bulging battery. We'll get to the ghosts and dimensions here a little bit later. So Sarah's asking, is it interdimensionally limited to limited thing? I'm not quite sure what you mean. How do we explore this interdimensionality of objects like a desk? Well, the desk is a three-dimensional object. So here's what I'll say. You kind of have to think a little bit outside the box. So there's a whole story of like the flatlanders that are living. If you take the surface of a desk, okay, which is flat, and just think of that flat surface there, okay, of the desk, and we'll say that's the second dimension. Everything there on the flat surface are squares, rectangles, triangles, circles. So if you were to drop a sphere onto that desk or onto that flat surface, that two-dimensional world, the flatlanders, beings living within that two-dimensional space, would have no concept or idea of the sphere because it's beyond their geometry. So as that sphere dropped into that two-dimensional area, it would first appear to the flatlanders as like a dot, and then it would expand out to a small circle and expand, until it got to the biggest circumference that you could get to of the circle. As the sphere continued to drop through, and then as it continued on its way, the circle would then get smaller and smaller and smaller and eventually disappear. So even though the flatlanders, they only saw a circle, but there's so much more beyond that they couldn't comprehend. We have things going on around us all the time that we can't comprehend because it's beyond our geometries, beyond our dimensionality. Our eyes only see into a very narrow band of the spectrum. We get glimpses of it. We'll see things at times, whether we think it's a shadow or an apparition, or maybe it's a shimmer or something like that. We're getting a little glimpse of something that is beyond us, but we are able to perceive a little bit of that. So we'll get to a couple more of these questions here shortly. The clip that I'm about to play is actually my story, my experience of what ended up becoming determined through a hypnosis session, an interdimensional being. But I'm going to go ahead and play this, give you guys the story of what's going on. Tom and Sarah are going to be very familiar with us, and a couple of others that are around here. But this is from, again, the Shadow Dimension, Season 1, Episode 1. Shadow entities are some of the most enigmatic and mysterious phenomena that we know of in the supernatural world. And I get asked quite often, try that again. Shadow entities are some of the most enigmatic and mysterious phenomena that we know of in the supernatural world. And I get asked quite often where my interest in this phenomena came from, basically where I got my start. And it all goes back to when I was a child, and I was about 8 years old. And the house that I lived in, I would never say was haunted. However, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and there was this tall, dark figure standing in the corner of my room. And of course, I had no idea at the time that you called it a shadow person or anything like that. I just thought there was an intruder in the house and it was about to kill me. But of course, I'm still alive to tell the tale. What it ended up doing after that was really unusual and quite different than most other shadow person stories that have been related to me over the many years that I've been researching this phenomenon. And what it did is it approached my bed, leaned over, grabbed me by the wrists, and crossed my arms across my body. Now, during this time, I'm trying to scream, my mouth opens up and nothing comes out. I'm completely frightened, and I'm looking up into this black, basically blank face. You know, there's no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no features whatsoever. It is just a black entity, for lack of a better term. I would say person, but I don't think it was a person. What it did after it crossed my arms like that is it ended up running off down the hall, and I turned my head from where I was laying and watched it run off down the hall, and of all things into a closet. I have no idea why it went into the closet. Well, at that point, I found my voice, found my legs. Okay, I have to assume it stopped. StreamYard has been doing a lot of weird things here lately where it doesn't want to play on my end, but it's playing on your end. So you're watching it and I have no idea what's going on with it. So that's my personal story from my first shadow experience. And what's fascinating is I had a hypnotic regression a few years back to try to determine what exactly that was. And without getting into too many details, because we're limited on time here, what we were able to figure out. So what was interesting about it was the hypnotherapist, Ariana. She was asking a lot of different questions, but I wasn't myself in the hypnosis session. Like you would think, okay, I'm going back into that moment and I should be able to experience it again, you know, from myself as my 8-year-old self. But instead, I was seeing the whole incident from the perspective of the shadow, which was really, really bizarre because I was looking down at my little 8-year-old self. So it was kind of disconcerting, but I could think and feel and all of this as the shadow entity. So basically we were channeling this shadow at that time. And so with the questions that she was throwing out there, like, you know, who are you? Why are you there? Et cetera, where are you from? What we were able to discern was that it was there from another dimension. What was interesting about that was when asked, you know, where are you from? Said, well, I'm from another space. And so Ariana ended up asking, so you mean like another dimension? The response was, no, I'm from another space, which means that we don't have a full grasp on what exactly other dimensions are. There's more that we need to learn, but still to us in our minds and what we know right now, it's another dimension. And as far as like what it was doing there, basically it was on a mission from this other dimension to study humanity. And that particular evening, it was assigned to the room of a human child and didn't realize at first that I could actually see it. And once it determined that I could see it and that it was frightening me, it didn't want to be frightening me. So when it crossed my arms like that, the whole thing was, it was putting me into a self hug. And then I got to see from that perspective, it was patting my wrist to kind of try to calm me down. And then it got out of there so it could stop scaring me. So it's really, really interesting perspective. But this whole idea of this thing was from this being was from another dimension. I couldn't fully see exactly the way it truly looked. I could only get a glimpse of the figure because it was beyond our dimension, and then it left to return to from whence it came. So yeah, that was my first real significant paranormal experience, was with some sort of interdimensional being, which is truly, truly fascinating. So, and yeah, I have the links down in the description to the shadow dimension, so you can catch that whole thing. Again, I'm not sure how it turned out here with, StreamYard being weird, the way it's been here. So let me see. Tom asking, after we die, what dimension do we enter? So I'm going to get to that more toward the end of this discussion. Some other things that we need to cover first before we get to that. Sarah, can interdimensionality work outside of time? Well, time is a dimension. So you have the other dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8, and onward. It still works because time doesn't really exist. That is a human construct, something that we've developed to help describe our reality, but it doesn't really exist. It's our consciousness. It's the dimension that our consciousness is on is the fourth, and all those other dimensions are it's outside the scope of time. All right. So that's interdimensional beings. And we're going to get into some of these other concepts of interdimensional beings as related to, well, some of the more ancient stories of our world. So those have been around for a while know that I've done a lot of traveling. I've gone to places like, Egypt. I've got the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour coming up for those that want to join us for that. Registration is still open. We do have some spots available for that. But I've also done a lot of traveling around this country as well. So Montezuma's Well. This is in Arizona, basically between Phoenix and Sedona. Montezuma's Well, Montezuma's Castle is the Verde Valley. And this particular location has a lot of fascinating ancient legends associated with what might be interdimensional beings, but it's also part of that great cataclysm story as well. So as we get into this, we'll talk about the connected universe. We'll see how this is connected as well.
Back here at Montezuma's Well. Back here at Montezuma's Well.
No. What?
Back here at Montezuma's Well. I always find this place interesting. There's fascinating legends associated with it. Of course, you can see the cliff dwellings right into the walls, similar to Montezuma's castle. So definitely obvious relationship between here and the castle site. Of course, the legends are that those peoples originated from here now and just pop out of the ground here, although in a way they did, in that when the great cataclysm happened, that they fled here, that this was an open hole, and there was a civilization of different peoples that lived here under the ground. So my former co-hostess Victoria Monday would talk about, hollowed earth, which is perfectly fine. These are the quote-unquote ant people. Somehow, some way they resembled ants, and our colleague who passed away here not too long ago, Clifford Mahudi, Zuni Elder, had a lot of really interesting tales about the ant people that lived underground here. Basically, they helped these people survive during the cataclysm. And when things had subsided and came back and were normal, they literally came up out of the ground, and then they populated the different areas, notably downstream there at Montezuma's castle. Of course, you can cliff dwellings there. There are also dwellings here within the rock come back around here a little bit. You can see the dwelling down there, and then actually all through here, you have the dwellings as well. Now, there's graffiti there. So a local photographer is trying to basically, do some marketing. But they had a beautiful scene of this area here where their origin stories were. Now, the water itself is actually very toxic. There's only 5 creatures that live within there that are original to here. You only find them here. They've basically evolved to survive the arsenic in the water here. And nobody can get down there. Anything that ever goes down, people, probes, whatever, always gets pushed back up.
Okay. I'm just going to have to trust that it stopped in the right place. Again, it locked up on my side, but I know you guys are actually able to see it on your end. So, yeah, whatever in the world has gone on with StreamYard and their updates, it's been a complete train wreck. So, yeah, with Montezuma as well, I mean, we're finding a survival story, or we're finding the story similar to what we find in like Atlantis and all kinds of cultures around the world having that, great flood story. Of course, Noah out of the Bible. We find the same story in ancient Sumer, all over the world. And so this story here, indigenous to the American Southwest, the ancient Hopi, the Zuni, basically the ancient Pueblans, and those tribes, believe that they are descended from those. Here's the thing about the these quote unquote ant people is that when they took them down into the well, now the water presumably wasn't there at that time, 10,000 years ago. But if you're underground like that and you have the water filling in, if it's a great flood, then you stand a great chance of being drowned within whatever's there. I mean, you could go down and then up, and you might have some pockets of air, but for an extended period of time, that would be challenging. So it's possible that they had some sort of access to some other portal, some other dimension, this sort of thing there. We find a similar story in Antarctica, the whole Admiral Byrd story, this sort of thing. Did he actually not just pass through into almost like an inner Earth sort of place, but into some other, did he pass through some sort of portal, go to some actual physical place, some other dimension? So same here with the ant people. We even find stories, more modern, 1945, the Trinity UFO crash, where the beings that were witnessed in that crash were described as the ant people. It's like, well, wait a second here. Those are the same descriptions of, from thousands and thousands of years ago, these beings. And many of these craft are seen zipping in and out of giant balls of light, which in many cases are most likely our portals. So are these beings, these ant people, actually living alongside of us? And when we had our cataclysm, did they take us into another dimension for a while to be safe, so that we weren't, or at least those humans weren't killed during that there were some survivors? So it's certainly possible. So another place where we see this is in what we call the star people, and we see the star people symbolism all over the world. We see portal symbolism all over the world, and I'm sticking in the American Southwest for the moment because it was so blatantly obvious in this location. So this is our ancient symbol for portal, is the spiral. All right. And that spiral is really a two-dimensional representation of three-dimensional vortex, the giant swirling vortex. So people a lot of times try to interchange the term portal and vortex, and really they're two different things. The portals can be spawned by vortices. The vortex is really, again, the spiraling energy. So think of a wind vortex is a tornado. A water vortex is a whirlpool. What we're talking about here is an energy vortex. Again, the two-dimensional representation of that is the spiral. We find that spiral all over the world. Ancient Egypt, Sardinia, Ireland. Find it in the American Southwest. Now, our traditional academia likes to say things like, well, it's could symbolize water. Well, no, the ancient symbol for water is the wavy line. So when you find that you have a culture that's using the wavy line for water, well, then what are they using the spiral for, right? Well, the indigenous people are telling you it's a portal. Well, yeah, it could be a migration pattern. Who in the world migrates in a spiral? But yet academia will say different things like this. A spiral pattern is great for like crime scene investigation, but not for migration. Yet that's one of the possibilities traditional academia throws out there. And still, yet, the ancient peoples and the traditional peoples are telling you this is a portal. Why don't we listen to them? They were the ones there. They were the ones that created it. So we find this a great setup on this. This is part of Petroglyph National Monument right outside of Albuquerque. And this particular location is called Boca Negra. But here we have our video doesn't want spiral petroglyph. Now, when we've talked about these before, we've talked about them in the context of portals, star people coming down and using some sort of portal technology, some sort of dimensional technology, we're not quite sure, some sort of energy to be able to come from their world to here using this. In fact, here we go. Here we have one of those gentlemen right here. Could be gentle lady. And the portal is right there. So I'm standing in what is essentially a stone circle in the middle of the mesa on Boca Negra. Now, it does have a eastward facing opening, which this is a view that's looking out toward the east, out toward the rising sun. And as you can see, it also has a very, very magnificent view. On our drive out yesterday, the spiral petroglyph up there, which of course is very interesting to me. This is something I've been researching a lot of because it is a symbol of energy and portal activity. Stargate locations generally have this symbol as well. So it's a controversial topic. There are those in the traditional mainstream that don't agree with that, but the indigenous people are telling us that these are portals. Now, from your portal there, you have over here the snake. Of course, we've talked before about that snake energy. When we say snake energy, really was an ancient symbol of energy. We find that in ancient Egypt. We've seen that at Chaco Canyon. And then if you just come down the steps here, you literally have the star people right here. So if you were actually to walk up the stairs the way we go, you have the star people using the energy to enter the portal. All right, there you go. It's a perfect setup. Star people using the energy to enter the portal. And so those portals, now that's one of the big questions there. Where are those portals taking them? Are they literally taking them to some other place in the cosmos if these are the star people? Possibly. That is certainly one idea. It could be somewhere else on the planet. It could be connecting from one location on the planet to another. It could be connecting to another dimension, like what we've been talking about all evening, connecting from one dimension to another. Could be connecting to another point in time. So there's a lot of different possibilities here. These are other things that I get into in Portals to the Stars. When we start talking about portals and stargates, and the difference between a portal and a stargate. So portals are naturally occurring in nature. This is where we start getting into like X points and things like this, and that interaction with different energies. A stargate is the ability for an intelligent being, whether that's human or otherwise, to harness a portal and be able to use it at their own will, to be able to do whatever they want to with it, whether it is going to some other place in the cosmos, another dimension, and these sorts of things. So some of the other questions here, bulging battery, we will get to this. Is consciousness bound to the complex interactions of neural structures? We are getting to consciousness here in a little while. Jose Sanchez, you don't have to do all caps, by the way. If everything has a location situated in its own dimension, then where could we say that heaven, purgatory, and hell are situated in other separate dimensions parallel to ours or somewhere else? Well, okay. Again, this is more of a, when we get into the consciousness aspect, this is the whole where do we go when we die question, which would be part of the consciousness conversation. But we are talking about either another dimension or something even beyond that. So I like this, Tom. That's why when we get older, we say age is a state of mind. Kind of is. All right, we'll get to a couple other questions here shortly. So, all right. So we've talked about different beings here on Earth. We have talked interdimensional beings as far as shadow people. We've talked the ant people out of legends of old. We've talked about the star people, and basically what you could easily say are extraterrestrials, right? So there's a growing contention that extraterrestrials aren't actually extraterrestrials. They are other beings living alongside of us that are interdimensional. And well, yes, some of them probably are. In that case, then they wouldn't be extraterrestrials. They would be, John Keel back in the 1960s had the term ultra-terrestrials. And honestly, if they're here on our planet, would they not just then be earthlings? Yeah, but we would call those ultra-terrestrials. And then there's also the idea that some of these are time travelers, that they are time travelers from the future, that just us. They're just us, that they're not extraterrestrials. They're just us from the future. And I say that's a little short-sighted. It could be us from the future. They could be other millions of years from now, after humanity is long since gone, other intelligent beings that have flourished, developed civilization, developed time travel technology, and have come back. So yeah, could be earthlings, but not us, that have gone back in time. Could also be extraterrestrials millions of years from now that have colonized the planet, again, developed civilization and time travel technology and came back. So then, they would be future extraterrestrials coming back in time. And then again, at what point do you call them earthlings? How many generations does it take an extraterrestrial to then become an earthling? Just like how many generations did it take my family after they came over here to America to be called Americans, right? It's semantics. I get that. But we find a lot of extraterrestrial stories, these whether it's an abduction scenario or similar to that nature, that are eerily similar and reminiscent of other legends and stories from the past that have been handed down for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So in specifically what we're going to refer to now are fairies. The fairy stories, in any case, not necessarily fairies themselves, but something that people were interacting with hundreds of years ago that they ended up calling fairies. And it's, a lot of times once you start going down that road, it immediately turns people off. So we're probably going to lose half the audience right here. Oh my gosh, I was talking about fairies, I'm out. But honestly, this was something that they created some sort of legend and lore around, because they weren't understanding what they were interacting with. They were getting pulled into these different realms and didn't understand what it was. So the story of Reese and Llewellyn. So Reese and Llewellyn, we're working for a particular farmer or whoever they were working for. They're coming back from the fields one day. They've got a horse, and Reese starts hearing some music coming from out of the woods. And he tells Llewellyn to take the horse and, head on back up to the farm. I'll join you in a little while. And Llewellyn's like, you sure? You should probably come along. And Reese is like, no. I want to check out what this music is. Llewellyn couldn't hear the music. He had no idea what Reese was talking about, but he was like, okay, fine. I'll see you in a little bit. So he takes the horse back, and people start asking, where's Reese? And he tells them, well, he was checking out some music that he was hearing in the woods. I should be back shortly. Doesn't show up at all that night. And people start wondering, did Llewellyn do something to Reese? Next morning comes around, and all of a sudden, now authorities are brought in because people are believing something happened, or they're not believing Llewellyn because he was walking off to music in the woods. Are you kidding me? So Llewellyn's like, no, I will take you to where he and I parted. So they go down there, and they're looking around, and they're still not believing him because Reese isn't there. But all of a sudden, Llewellyn starts to hear the music. So he starts stepping into the woods a little bit. Where's that coming from? And then all of a sudden, he finds Reese, and there are all these little beings that he's there dancing and singing and having a great time with. And Llewellyn tells him, what are you doing? You need to come. Everybody's looking for you. They think I killed you. And Reese is like, what are you talking about? He's like, I've only been here 5 minutes. Let me finish the dance. He's like, no, you haven't been here just 5 minutes. You've been there all night and into the next morning. And so finally pulls Reese out, and everyone lives happily ever after. But where did Reese go? He went into, they call it, in this particular case, they call it the fairy realm. But really, it was some other dimension, something outside of our dimension of time. So was this the fifth, sixth, seventh dimension? We don't know. We don't know where exactly that is. But I think a lot of times when we start talking about like extraterrestrial abductions, and there's this whole, problem with time loss, or people think that, an incident happened that took 5 or 10 minutes, and all of a sudden it's a few hours that are just gone. I think what's happening here in a lot of these cases is that they're actually being taken into another dimension. So that kind of quote unquote mothership, sure, maybe it is a ship or whatever it is, but it's within another dimension, which is why most humans aren't seeing it. Could be people are saying, I think I was taken, just above my house into this ship, but nobody else in the neighborhood is seeing this thing. And then there's this, big time loss problem with it. Well, again, time is a human construct for us to help keep track of our reality. And if you're taken outside of that dimension, if you're taken outside the dimension of time, it's going to work very, very differently for you. You're going to experience that in a very, very different way. So when you come back here, you're going to seem very, very, you're going to be very discombobulated about it. And you find a lot of these interesting stories of, in a lot of different cultures. And some of these are pretty recent. The boy that was lost inside Pilcher Mountain, they just showed up. This is in Alaska. Showed up in the middle of the wilderness, in the snow, no footsteps around him or anything. And he's saying that he met a girl there that had been there for 40 years, but she was still a little girl. Because time worked differently like that. So a lot of interesting stories down that road. So, all right. So I promised consciousness. I had a whole other clip that I was going to show. I'll actually do it during the after shows when I will show it. It's actually a clip from the upcoming season of The Shadow Dimension. It does, when actually it's no longer a season. It's a 90-minute documentary. So hopefully out into this fall. I know I've been promising this thing forever. There's been a lot of post-production issues, for lack of a better reason or excuse, but it's an entire incident that I and Megan Talbert had experienced at the Hinsdale house. So after show, you guys will get that. And so another reason for many of you to become members of the Connected Universe portal, or I've been posting these to the Patreon as well for those that are on the time traveler level on Patreon. So Connected Universe portal equals time travel time traveler level on Patreon, you get access to both. So, all right. So consciousness, people want to know about, we've had a lot of questions in the chat so far about this. So again, I'll reiterate that our consciousness is on the fourth dimension of time, which makes us, remarkable beings. We are multidimensional beings. Our fourth dimensional consciousness is inside our third dimensional body. When the body passes, the consciousness goes, well, that's the big question. Where do we go when we die? Well, what's interesting is, our religions and our spiritual culture has had a lot of different ideas about this. They've, whether it's heaven or Summerland or the Elysian Fields or whatever, all kinds of different concepts of this. Science seems to finally be catching up a little bit to this, although science and spirituality used to be one and the same thing. And then they split apart some time ago. Like, for instance, your ancient Egyptian priests were also your engineers and your architects and et cetera, your scientists and everything. In any case. So interesting research here. Stuart Hameroff, Roger Penrose. So according to them, the consciousness does reside, the soul resides within the human body, within the microtubules of the brain, according to them. And then when the body passes, the consciousness returns to the universe, returns to the cosmos. Now, when pressed for, okay, if it returns to the cosmos, returns to the universe, where does it go? And it's interesting with Roger Penrose, reading some of his interviews, he'll say, religiously, you'd call me an atheist. I don't subscribe to any one particular religion or anything like that. And I know they each have their own ideas of what happens. He's like, I can't get on board with any of those. I know it goes somewhere, but I can't tell you where. So that's as far as science has taken this so far. And it's difficult for us to truly know, is it one of those other dimensions? Is what we might call heaven? You hear a lot of interesting stories from people who have had near-death experiences, and they see a lot of similar things, and there's a lot of things that they see differently too. Of course, you have this idea of reincarnation as well, that we go somewhere and we come back. So my belief is we go somewhere beyond all of those dimensions, that we return to source. So the idea that, I don't believe it's a computer, but I believe we are in some sort of simulation, that we return to some sort of home world beyond all of those dimensions. And we're there for a while, and then we come back and we have another existence. That's my belief of the way it works. Now, those other dimensions, there are other beings and entities that live within those dimensions. Can we visit them after we've lost the body? Possibly. I believe that sometimes we're being taken to those, some of these abduction scenarios. And so people are able to temporarily travel there. Some of these different portals that we're talking about, taking them to other dimensions. Do we have, if we were to figure out the key for that, would we be able to pass into one of those dimensions seamlessly? Well, I think the ancients had an inkling of that when you start looking at ancient Egypt with their various stargates and things like this, that they were trying to make that happen. And it seems in many cases that they actually did. So where is this all headed then, if we can get access to other dimensions? Well, our science has also been trying to create their own wormholes. So the wormhole based off of the Einstein-Rosen bridge. And this was done almost 2 years ago now, or at least almost 2 years ago when the report came out. They would have been working on it 2 years ago. And basically what happened here is, on the quantum level, they created two tiny black holes and they connected them with a wormhole, and they passed a message through. So science is trying to work on these sorts of things. Wormholes to where? Well, somewhere else in the universe, yeah, of course. Um, to be able to move across the planet at greater speeds, like if I wanted to show up in Egypt tomorrow, or even like right now, just walk through the portal, walk through the wormhole, be right there. Yeah. It's not at that level yet. Again, very, very small quantum level. Reporters covering the case asked them, well, could you send a dog through this? And the scientists just laughed at them. No, we're not sending life forms through this. It's too small. We sent a message through. And why would we send a life form through first? Be like a probe or something like that. They sent a message through to start with, of course. So science is on the way there. I just hope they don't create such a massive black hole in the lab that it just sucks in the earth and destroys us. That would be pretty unfortunate. So let me go ahead and get to some of your questions here in the last few minutes that we have. So again, I'm going to be showing that clip that we didn't get a chance to see here from the upcoming Shadow Dimension in the after show. Honestly, I was going to show that clip in the after show anyway. There was a much longer clip that was a much more detailed one from an older video that I've done on the YouTube channel. The Shadow Dimension clip kind of broke it down a little bit more. So we didn't have time for either one of those. So after show, we'll have that. So that's Members Connecting Universe Portal. All right. Let me back up through here a little bit. Okay. So Jose, if spirits can see us from a higher dimension and we can't see them, but they have been quote unquote heard, can sound travel through dimensions? So a short answer is yes, because sound is on a different wavelength. So a story that I usually tell for this is the paranormal investigation that we did at Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. I should have another clip I should have played, but it's also in the Shadow Dimension. I think that one is in, I think it's in episode 6. I think that's a final episode of season 1 for Shadow Dimension. But basically, the short of the story is that passing into the restaurant area, or the kitchen of the restaurant, just doing the last photo sweep of the restaurant. Had a couple people in the upper bar area, a couple other people were out in the front restaurant. I pass into the kitchen, and all of a sudden there's this shadow that darted across the room. And you heard the bang sound of it slamming into this side door, which was just a flimsy metal door, a door that waiters and waitresses could just push through carrying large trays of food. The door didn't move at all. We heard a boom, the bang of it. And so I started shouting out to the others, hey, did you guys hear that? They're like, yeah, we heard that. And start questioning them, thinking, okay, maybe they're messing with me, threw something at the door or whatever, which they hadn't. And even if they had, the door would have moved, the door didn't move. So for a long time, I postulated that this shadow was on some other dimension, and that in its dimension, that door blew wide open. It ran off into the restaurant area, something that I spooked. When I walked into that kitchen, maybe it saw me as a shadow, maybe it saw me as a ghost, no idea, but I scared it. And it ran through that door. Perhaps in its dimension, that door blew wide open. But me, being in my own dimension, it didn't. However, sound works on a different wavelength. And so I was able to hear it through the dimensions, but couldn't actually see it. We postulated some of this idea for the Alaska Triangle television show as well, with the missing Douglas and hearing the, some of the radio chatter and things like that later on. So in my Travels Through Time book, I've modified my stance on it a little bit, in that in one sense, you could say it's interdimensional, because I believe it was actually from another point in time. I believe that there was a time slip that was going on there. So there was again, sound working at a different wavelength came through the dimensions differently. But what I was actually witnessing was some sort of time slip. And I was actually witnessing somebody from another point in time. And yeah, they ran through that door. But again, in my timeline, or my point in time, door didn't open, but in theirs it did. So All right. Let me see if I can grab another one here because we are just about at the end. So, Brandon, Fade Portal with time dilation. So in a sense, because okay, so what we're really talking about there again is moving from one dimension to another, and if they move outside of our dimension, time is going to work differently. It's not really time dilation. I mean, time dilation is like when you move off of our planet that um, you're carrying a watch with you. When you come back down, it's going to be a little bit off, and we're talking like milliseconds, just because of the way that we keep track of time. Remember, time is a human construct just for us to help keep track of our reality, and it has to do with the gravity of the planet and that sort of thing. But when you're outside the dimension of time, time dilation doesn't matter whatsoever. I had somebody argue with me about this a couple of years ago, just before I was about to publish Travels Through Time. So I actually included that argument in Travels Through Time. But once you're outside the dimension of time, when you're in fifth dimensional space, sixth dimensional space, all that, and time is just an object, you can move in and about time. Time dilation is completely irrelevant at that point because you're outside the scope of it. It only matters to those that are within this fourth dimension of time. Anybody outside of it doesn't matter whatsoever. So, all right. So we have gotten down to the end of our show here. I do want to encourage those that are listening to the podcast version of this later. Please join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. I do want to share with everybody again that on September 27th at the Wandle House Museum, Brewster, Ohio. This was just really a preview of that, touching on some of the topics, but we will be covering interdimensional beings, consciousness and time travel, stargates, portals, ancient symbolism, so much more. So I do have the link down in the description to grab tickets for that, and hope to see many of you there. So, all right. Those that are members of Connecting Universe Portal, stick around. I'll be sharing the clip that I wasn't able to share during the show. And again, it's from the shadow dimension, so you can check those links down in the description as well. But this one's from the upcoming hour and a half Beyond the Shadows, the newer segment of that. So, all right, everybody. Till next time, if time really exists.